Hello, my darlings. This is Chauncey from Radio Wasteland, and tonight we're going to cover the history of the Nazis in Antarctica in about 10 minutes. I love Antarctica. I love the cold. I love the snow. I love winter. I love Christmas. And I love crazy conspiracy stories about the Nazis. I know it's weird to have a love and the Nazis in the same sentence, but as a fan of horror, dystopian, sci-fi, and post-apocalyptic fiction, I have to acknowledge that the Nazis are a great starting point to create one of these stories. So, Mysteries of Antarctica has been a recent interest of mine, so when I decided to look into the history, it was not hard to start at the Nazis. Let's run down the basics. Here's what we know. The premise that the Nazis established a secret base in Antarctica is not entirely crazy. It is based on an actual operation, an operation that we have solid proof happened, where the Nazis sent an expedition to Antarctica. In the summer of 1936, Hitler was completing a 4-year plan where he was building up the German economy and military to prepare for war. Hitler, knowing war was imminent, possibly because he was starting them, wanted to build up supplies just in case items couldn't be acquired during the war. One of these things, oddly enough, was fats. Fats like butter and other dairy products, lard, cheese, bacon, detergents, candles, etc. So Germany set its sights on the Southern Ocean for the fattiest of all sea fatties, whales. They started building factory whaling ships and took commercial whaling on the road. The idea was to establish ownership of some land and routes for whaling. In August 1936, the German Foreign Office found some unclaimed territory in Antarctica between Norwegian and British zones, and an expedition to explore and claim the region was off. When the ship reached its destination, it ran aerial reconnaissance and named it New Schwabenland after the ship they arrived on. The aerial reconnaissance accomplished two things: to photograph the area for scientific research and cartography, and to claim it for Nazi Germany. The Schwabenland expedition didn't last long. They completed their work and left for home on February 5th, 1939. Okay, the funniest part for me is on one of their research flights, the plane was running low on fuel and needed to lighten the plane so that they could make it back to the ship. One of the things they had to throw out was boxes of tiny metal swastikas, boxes that were supposed to be dropped across that part of Antarctica the Nazis had claimed, and the swastikas were never recovered. At first, when I heard this, I thought, how funny that they sprinkled little signs of evil around Antarctica, and then I realized that they didn't. They dropped a box, and that their plan really was what I thought was a joke. They really planned on sprinkling little signs of evil on their stuff to claim it. I mean, that's like licking it. Now, in 1947, 2 years after Hitler's reported death, Ladislaus Szabo, a Hungarian exile in Argentina, proposed that the Schwabenland, the German ship from the expedition in 1938, had set up a base there. The original theory was proposed in 1947 by Ladislaus Szabo, a Hungarian exile in Argentina. He claimed that Hitler survived the war and that U-boats that docked in Argentina after the war had first dropped him off at a secret Nazi base. He proposed that the Schwabenland, a German ship that sailed to Antarctica, had set up a base there. From here, the concept expanded quite drastically. As the story expands, the evidence gets further and further between, but I have to admit some is in the form of news clippings, and I'm a sucker for news clippings, but I'm not sure if they're real news clippings. It expands to the long-held idea that Adolf Hitler did not commit suicide in his bunker in Berlin in 1945 with his love secretary, Eva Braun, but was able to escape via submarine. But why would people think that Hitler was still alive? Well, this is because of a few important quotes from some very famous, infamous, and influential people. After the end of the war in 1952, President Dwight D. Eisenhower was quoted as saying, "We have been unable to unearth not one bit of tangible evidence of Hitler's death. Many people believe that Hitler escaped from Berlin." Stalin's top army officer, Marshal Gregory Zhukov, whose troops were the first to enter Berlin, stated in 1945, "We have found no corpse that could be Hitler's." The chief of U.S. trial counsel at Nuremberg, Thomas J. Dodd, said, "No one can say that he is dead." And former Secretary of State Jimmy Burns, in his book Speaking Frankly, stated that after the war, at the Potsdam Conference of the Big Four, he met Stalin, who left his chair, came over, and clinked his liquor glass with mine in a very friendly manner. I said to him, "Marshal Stalin, "What is your theory about the death of Hitler?" Stalin replied, "He is not dead. He escaped either to Spain or Argentina." Okay, so some people now think as many as 250,000 Nazis, maybe even Hitler, escaped in U-boats from Germany in the last days of World War II. And guess where they think they went? That's right, a secret base set up in Antarctica. And some people say Argentina. An easy argument is that so many Nazi officers and criminals like Adolf Eichmann or Joseph Mengele were able to escape from Germany. Who's to say that Hitler couldn't have set up a plan to get out too? It was known that Hitler, like many dictators, used doubles. In the 1930s, early Nazi Party members were already infatuated with the idea that the Earth was hollow. Not only hollow, but also inhabited by a superior race based on a Russian occultist, philosopher, and author, Madame Blavatsky's theories. And of course, if the race is superior, high-up Nazis had to think they were related. During the Nuremberg trial, Admiral Karl Dönitz, a German admiral during the Nazi era who briefly succeeded Adolf Hitler as the German head of state, stated, "The German submarine fleet has even now established an earthly paradise, an impregnable fortress for the Führer in whatever part of the world." The admiral didn't specify where exactly, but the assumption is that it was Antarctica. After the war, Nazi sympathizer Ernst Zundel claimed that Hitler and a trusted group of men had been able to escape aboard a ship which they entered the Earth through a hole at the South Pole. Inside the Earth, Nazi scientists worked to build a new army with which to take over the world, an army that could count on Revolutionary round, flying vehicles, UFOs. Another thing believers cite is the Nazis agreeing to the Antarctic Treaty. The treaty makes Antarctica a research zone and states that Antarctica can't have any missiles or weapons or permanent stuff set up there. I think it even goes so far as to say no building can be built there that can't also be taken down, removed without leaving a mark. They feel that the agreement might have been to keep people from finding out more about it, but, I find it a little vague. So now the story gets even vaguer, but to me, vague is where things really get interesting. The further expanded theory is that the initial expedition, or at least follow-up expeditions by the Nazis to Antarctica, sent warships and submarines and tons of equipment, large enough to include scientists, military, and construction crews. During their exploration of the area, they discovered a network of underground caves, complete with a geothermal heated lake. There is where they supposedly build a massive base called New Berlin. But it doesn't stop there. In further exploration of the Antarctic, they discover extraterrestrial technology, or maybe even meet aliens. The aliens suspected vary from the Greys to reptilians. At this point, they learn to use or recreate alien tech and spaceships. And finally, the end of the theory is that the Antarctic-dwelling Nazis' end goal is a new world order or a Fourth Reich. So that's the theory. Another small bit of news that at least supports the idea that Nazis set up an Antarctic base is that in 2016, Russian scientists found a secret Arctic base, including documents and artifacts, bullets, and bunkers that were used as tactical weather stations, but its end was not so elaborate. It had to be evacuated when its inhabitants ate spoiled meat and became sick. Ultimately, the theory is very refuted by mainstream scientists and archaeologists. Colin Summerhays, a geologist and oceanographer with the Scott Polar Research Institute, and Peter Beeching, a journalist and historian specializing in international affairs, published Hitler's Antarctic Base, The Myth and the Reality in 2006. A peer-reviewed study of evidence about Antarctica's geography and weather, the history of polar exploration, and all the relevant countries' declassified files. So I know what I believe and what I don't believe, and I know the two of them don't always agree with one another, but I like to think I can believe them both at the same time. What do you believe on this one? Are there Antarctic Nazis waiting to take over the world with alien tech? Alright, thanks for checking out Radio Wasteland's first in about 10 minutes video. It's something we hope to do a little bit more often. If you liked what you saw here, hit like, hit subscribe, comment, do all that stuff. Visit us at radiowasteland.us and, tell your friends.